Rag and bone, any old rag and bone, rag and bone, rag and bone, any old.
Do you remember that time when we all had to stay at home and we weren't allowed outside for a long, long time? It's a few years ago. And whilst that was happening, arts organisations all over the place were like going, hey, we still want to do things, but we've got to do things in a slightly different way. So my wife, who's a storyteller, Vanessa, was commissioned to organise some virtual storytelling walks in Southeast London, in Bermondsey. And I was roped in as a technical advisor with regards to tech issues. And Vanessa got a bunch of storytellers from all over the place to tell stories which were to be played on people's headphones as they walked through Bermondsey. And Richard was one of the storytellers. And I phoned up Richard to have a short conversation on how to make sure that his recording was absolutely fine. And our conversation, because we kind of went off topic fairly quickly. So we kind of sorted out how to record things fairly quickly. And then we talked for around about 2 hours, just about everything. And I was really interested in Richard's story of his career and his life. And he really liked the music and stuff that I did. And we thought, well, let's see, seeing as we're all on Zoom at this particular time, let's see if we can write some songs together. So that's kind of what happened. And we just sat down having a Zoom meeting, not dissimilar to this, with me holding a guitar and Richard having a bunch of words. And we just started writing songs together. And that's basically the story.
Well, I grew up in a nomadic family, so I grew up in a trailer or a caravan. I grew up in a fairly modern caravan for the time in the 1960s. My dad's caravan that he grew up in was pulled by horses. It wasn't until I was 5 years old, really, when I went to school for the first time, that I realized how different we were. Because again, I always say that no child ever knows they're different until somebody tells them they are or shows them they are. However you grow up, that's your life, that's your world. And then going to school was a big eye-opener. People were very different. There were, in our family, for example, everybody, we'd sometimes travel just maybe in a group of 3 or 4 families, and then we'd get together and be with an extended family. There might be 20 caravans at a fair or something. But as a child, if you wanted something to eat, you just went into any caravan at dinner time and somebody would feed you. And when I went to school and I saw that we had a couple of poor children, they went across the road or down the road and they lived next door to people who had plenty. And I found that very, very strange to understand how you could live next door to somebody or near somebody, because I would say we were all the same people, and how you could not look after your people as we looked after our people. That was very strange. And it's still very strange for me now to understand, even though I live in a house a lot of the time, and I live in a neighborhood, how people who live together for 20 years can see each other as family or look after each other. If somebody doesn't have something, why doesn't somebody just give it? I think that might be quite a naive, childish thing, but that's the way I've always thought, and that was the way I was brought up.
That's really interesting. I was brought up in Dorset, East Dorset, a place called Wimborne, and pretty normal, relatively poor middle class upbringing. Moved to London as soon as I could because whilst I love the countryside, I'm an artist and there wasn't necessarily that much space for me as an artist. So I've been a professional songwriter. I've been basically I've been a jack of all trades in dance music, and I still make my living as a professional musician, music producer, and also actually as well as a storyteller, because my wife's a storyteller and I fell into the trade as well. What does interest me in what Richard was just saying there is that being surprised by the lack of connection. So when you were saying that thing about being surprised by a lack of connection between people, between have and have not. That's certainly, I mean, that's something to really think about, I think.
And it's interesting because I've had situations where I've seen people who haven't got anything to eat, and I can't eat if somebody else doesn't have something to eat. So I'd rather go out. I'd rather go without as well. And I think it's maybe some kind of, that traditional going back as we were, 10,000 years ago, we were all hunter-gatherers. We were all tribal people to some extent. And I don't think any tribe would ever let anybody else in the tribe go without. You would share what you had, even if you all had less. So yeah, I still find that, again, without getting very political, this country and lots of other Western countries have so much money, and some people have so much, in fact, way too much of anything, and yet they don't share it. We have incredible poverty, which I never thought I would see. When my older relatives talked about how some of the 1920s and the 30s depressions were, and you had bread lines. When people talk about being on the bread line, they told me about people, the working people who were without jobs, the working class people, and they would stand in bread lines, and now people stand in food bank lines. That's 100 years down the line. In some ways we haven't evolved very much, which I think is a real shame.
We purpose, we use rag and bone point of view.
What we do to write a song is that we'll have a conversation for an hour or two, and then we'll spend and then probably we'll meet up again in about a week afterwards online, and Richard will have got some words, and he'll tell me the words in real time, and I will react to them and go, oh, that works there, that's good, this'll happen. And then you'll get these really interesting stories. And it's funny because like one of the conversations we had recently was, so I've a mate of mine who's a sousaphone player, but he also happens to be a mechanic. And he was working in a breaker's yard in Romford. And he noticed that a lot of transit vans were coming in with horse brasses on them. And I'm a folklorist. I'm really interested in that. And I just mentioned it. I mentioned that to Richard, and then Richard was just talking about how much he remembers his transit van. And we're going, well, we'll write a song about that. I mean, have you got the lyrics of that to hand, Richard?
I don't, but I know it rhymes with Dagenham, doesn't it? And,
yeah, the pride of Dagenham.
The pride of Dagenham, these transit vans. And again, transit vans kind of replaced the horses as the main transport in a way. And they became very iconic amongst traveling people. But just going back to what George was saying about the songs, and again, I was brought up to work collaboratively. You earn some money, they share it, share the work, share the money, and that's what happened with George, because we started working on these things together, and there was no thought in either of our heads that actually, well, George is just helping me to do these songs, so these are my songs, so they're sort of like Richard O'Neill with George kind of thing, doing the music. So we just do everything right down the middle, and it just happened and I know this word is overused, but I think it's the best word to use for us. It happened very organically right from the start. So we do these songs, and we have really no idea what we're going to do with them, but that was the thing. The songs, we wanted just to do the songs. What was going to come after would take care of itself. Then we started to do some Zooms for some of the schools that I knew, and we did some of the songs. But the thing was, even though George has got loads of other musical things that he does throughout the year, and I've got things that I do throughout the year, lots of different things, where we could have both used one or more of those songs, we didn't. And that wasn't a conscious decision from either of us. It was just a case of, well, we keep those songs for when we're together. And I guess there's something, quite beautiful about that. And I think that's what used to happen with a lot of the older people as well in different communities, that they would save that song for when everybody got together. So it became a very special, and these songs are very special when we sing them. Then that they are really, really important, what we've got to say. And they don't get sort of thrown around and used by each of us, because I think if either of us used the song on our own for a period of time, it would change dramatically. And then when we got back together, it wouldn't marry up. It just wouldn't meet. But what we did do, actually, we decided together, somebody asked us, could they use one of our songs as the outro for a short film they'd made? And we both agreed that was fine. It was a community-made film. And we both, it went to lots of festivals, but we both agreed that was okay to use it.
That was about that kid from Bradford.
Yeah, Rag and Bone, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Really nice little film, that.
Never broken, me and you. What we do is the glue.
What this is it's an opportunity for audience members to identify with their own lives from what Richard is saying, but also people to be able to learn something that they wouldn't otherwise know. And then the songs kind of focus the conversation. So like we were, and this has just grown. This is not like that we plan to do this. It's just the fact is both Richard and I are talkers. So we'll talk about the things that we find interesting about our relationship and about the relationship between the music and the heritage that it's kind of representing. And then those moments are you know, when the musical performance happens, what will be happening is that I will be on one side of the stage, and Richard will be in the center. And when we're singing, Richard will be singing. Richard is a storyteller, and he's a professional speaker. And I'm a musician and a professional singer. And what will happen is that I will be singing and Richard will be singing as well, the lead together, so that we're doing that with the understanding that Richard's voice is the loudest one and my one is there just to kind of help the voice along. But I'm not the focus, I'm on the side, because I don't. But the funny thing is I don't see this project as necessarily being about either of us. I know that sounds weird. It's about Richard's experience, and it's about something which is kind of almost intangible.
One lovely young woman said to me, with all the storytelling and the books and everything that I do, she said, "Do you know what, Uncle Richard?" And in the traveling community, generally, the more traditional people, if you're as old as their dad or granddad, they call you uncle. And she said, you know, and she was probably about 15, 16. And she said, "You know what, Uncle?" She said, "You're like our snowplow, aren't you?" She said, "You're clearing stuff out the way for us to come along." And I thought that was the most beautiful way of putting it. And I think that's what we're doing as well, because there will be some, and we know there are some amazing singers, there will be some amazing songwriters out there in the traveling communities. And if we can be that snowplow, clear the way, so they say, "Oh, well, them two old geezers have gone now. Look at them. They're, you know, they're out the way. And now it's clear for us." And nothing would give George or I greater pleasure into having a concert where there are hundreds of people watching, and we've got 20 or 30 different people from traveling communities of all ages up on stage with us, singing our songs, maybe even a traveler choir, you know, and the potential for a lot of the songs that we've created, like we say, one of them's been used on a film. But again, one of the other songs we created about a woman from Sheffield a long time ago, she was named the Gypsy Queen, and we wrote this song about her. And we've already had a theatre company who said, "Do you know what? That would make a really brilliant play." Again, just this idea that your creativity has lots and lots of different potentials. So we have lots and lots of things that we would like to do, and they're there just waiting to happen.
Rag and bone.